Emma's joining us. A couple of people coming in. Excuse. So listen, thanks all for coming. We will get going in a minute. Last week was quite interesting. Last week, it was really an introduction to leadership, or just some of the topics that we'd be talking about. Today, we're going to get into the element of vision around leadership. So the importance of visionary leadership, how that helps, the opportunities to develop business through it, why it matters, and so on. And we'll have a bit of a conversation about that. We'll probably spend 15, 20 minutes looking at that, and then we'll just have a conversation amongst ourselves from there on, and just see where it goes. An opportunity to network too and share ideas, because within this group, I'd like to think I can add some value to the group, but we've also got 10 or 12 other people who are in many ways far more experienced than me. We've got people on here that have run multiple business. Andrew's on the line, he's run a dozen businesses. I know Daniel. John, of course, has worked in many businesses. Alex, I can't think how many you've worked in. But if we take that collective brilliance, far more than one of us will know. So we'll try and make the most of that and give you some time to have a chat. So there's a dozen or so of us in the room. Let's close that down, and shall we crack on? And then if anybody else arrives, we'll do our best to let them in. Let's just share for you. Good. So Lunchtime Leadership Lab, the notion of this is really just to say that leadership within business these days is important. It's, as John mentioned earlier when he kind of came on, it's a massive topic. How are we going to get through everything? Well, the fact is we can't get through everything in these lunchtime sessions, but I've picked a dozen topics that we can have a chat about, which will help. There are a number of ingredients that will help us lead better business, and that's one of the themes of this. How can we as leaders help lead better business and businesses, not just to help us, but our people, stakeholders, communities. And why is that? Because better business is good for us all. It's good for our stakeholders, it's good for communities, and it's good for the country. And let's face it, the government needs better businesses because it can invest in people, can grow, innovate, share, develop, export, and heaven forbid, pay tax. So I think we're at this really kind of pivotal point where leaders are perhaps under the spotlight more. And we talked a little bit about this last week. Why is it so important for leaders to be able to lead change? And the notion really that leaders have two jobs. One is running the business, of course. The other one is creating an environment or leading people where people can be at their best, and therefore they can bring the strategy to life. And there was a relational shift that we talked about last week, which was just looking at leaders from this notion that at one point people really, from a leadership perspective, they led as expert, leader as expert. But that's really changing now to leader as coach. How can we as leaders coach people to be better, to be more efficient, to be more effective, to draw on their resources that they have, their knowledge and creativity? We can't know it all ourselves. And certainly with COVID and distributed working and work from anywhere, we've got to have those better quality conversations. So these are some of the things that we were talking about last week in order to access potential which exists in the business, which we already pay for, in order to improve performance and productivity. So this week, if we look on the left-hand side, there's the dozen or so topics that we'll cover over a dozen weeks. But this one is about vision. The reason I put it up early is I think this is really, really important. This notion of, as leaders, creating that vision for people, a vision that people can engage with, can align with, and ultimately help deliver. Yeah. So we want that. We want to raise people's heads up, or raise their vision up. So often we see in business, people are looking at the pedals of the car, I suppose, rather than looking out the windscreen. And so how can we raise people up, elevate people's thinking and behaviors behind that vision? So we're going to go into a few of those in a minute, but if I may, I've got a couple of questions for you just to have a look at, and perhaps you could pop in chat actually some of your answers if you like. So the question is, what does your business need from leaders and leadership? Have a think about that just for a moment. If you want to pop it in chat, great. Or if you prefer just to think about it for yourself, no problem at all. But what is it that your business needs? The reason I put business need is I've worked with a lot of companies who will buy a leadership development program, but it doesn't necessarily meet their leadership needs, of their business needs. So what is it your business needs from leaders and leadership? Okay. So clear communication, thank you. It's funny, isn't it, when you sort of see the not just the old-fashioned ones, but the standard ones, common goals. But it's so important. We say these things, and maybe sometimes we forget. But you want those clear goals. You want the clarity. It matters. So excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks. So next one, let's just think more about vision if we can. What do you understand by vision? What does the term mean to you? And actually, if you want to answer the two questions together, no problem. So one is, what does vision mean to you? What do you think about it when you think about it? And then the second one is, how does having a clear shared vision benefit people? How does it benefit the business? Why does it matter? So two questions. What do you understand by it? What is it? And how is it going to help you? Andrew, thank you. Clear communicated strategy. Leadership has changed so much since lockdown. Managers need to think differently. Yes, superb. Thank you. Where the business is going. Vision is making sure the company values are understood and adhered to. Going to actually have a chat about that one in a minute, about vision and values, and just kind of make that connection. But I think really, when we think about vision, it's that clear view, isn't it? And a visionary leader is somebody who inspires their team towards a common goal. It's about purpose. It's about innovation. But people need to know where they're going. They need to know what direction they're heading in. Yes. Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for that. So we've just had to think about what a little bit about leadership, what vision is, and why we need it. And a point that just arose actually on the chat there, I think it was from John, is about vision and values. And when I work with clients, I try and really encourage them to think about, so what is the vision? You know, where are you heading to? And spend some time on that with them. But then how are you going to deliver it? Really links to the values. So for example, are we going to deliver the vision ethically, sustainably? Are we going to do it in a kind and caring way? Are we going to include people? Or are we going to, for example, deliver the vision at all costs? Doesn't matter how we get there, doesn't matter who we upset. But when you start bringing the two together, you can have great conversations against the values in service of delivering the vision. And there was a company I was working with a while ago down in Portsmouth, fabulous company, actually really looking at using data much more efficiently and effectively to help customers grow. And they employed a lot of young maths graduates. And one of their leaders was, or if you like, loosely speaking, I would have called it bullying. We might call it something else now. I think they called it banter, but I think it strayed over that for me. And it was really useful to have vision and values together, because you can look at the vision and say to this person, to the manager, I didn't have to, it wasn't me against him. It was saying, look, let's just have a look at the vision. What's the vision for this business, which you shared? I said, okay, so what are the values? How are we going to live this vision? How are we going to bring it to life? And we looked at the values, and then it was really useful to say, so how was that behavior with that young person? How does it fit into the values? How does it enable the vision? And actually said, well, it doesn't. So it was a really easy conversation to have. I don't know if somebody's, it might be worth muting. I'm not sure who that is, but I can hear sort of some background noise. It might be off-putting for other people. So if you could go on mute, that would be fab. And then we'll come off mute when we have a conversation. So there you go. So just vision and values, really think about the two together and how they support each other. And I've got a couple of slides for you in a minute that we will have a look at, which I hope will make a little bit more sense to you. The next part, just to perhaps have a think about, and actually is communication and contribution. Hold that one lightly, and I'm just going to skip through to to a slide. Just a quick one. Has anybody seen these slides before? You know, John, are you familiar with? And if you want to come off mute and tell me, anybody familiar with Kotter's work or with the Oxygen report about enabling businesses through better leadership and management? Anybody had a look at those? What do you think? So two models to share. So Kotter is, I don't know, 30, 40 years old, is it? I still think it's an excellent model, really helps. You know, sense of urgency, guiding coalition. But look at number 3, developing a vision and strategy. Number 4, communicating that vision. So important that leaders are thinking about how to do this. Funny, isn't it? You know, Kotter spent years, working at Harvard and telling us why change fails, coming up with these 8 steps to help us deliver change. And yet 30, 40 years later, we're still using his metrics, which are, I think, 70% of change programs fail, number 1, but we're still talking about his 8-step model for delivering change 30, 40 years on. And yet somehow we don't seem to be getting any better at it, which is one of the premises that I have around. We have to learn to lead change, to be more efficient in leading change as a leadership skill. And then if you look on the right-hand side, Oxygen report, it's a little bit outdated. I've used the first Oxygen report, which gave us 8 hallmarks or 8 steps. And yet they've redone it. I think there's now 10. So if anybody looks at it and says this is a bit out of date, is actually. But look at those 8. And just notice, if you have a quick shufty through there, we were just talking about vision and values. If you just have a look at it, we've got number 5, be a good communicator. We've talked about that. Number 7, have a clear vision. So what we know is in all these leadership models, they're kind of talking about these things. But what we need to do is really kind of bring it out. Sorry, just give me a sec. I've just got some messages in chat just to have a quick look at. Who's that? Yeah, John, we don't use people's strengths enough. We really need to kind of, fix, I suppose, sort of fix that or make sense of that one. Is how can we engage and employ people's strengths, which is what I was saying, really about that collective brilliance bit. If there's a dozen of us on this call, I don't know what the average IQ is in the UK. I think it's just under, so fractionally under 100, isn't it? 99 point something, 99.7 or something. On this call, maybe it's 120, maybe more. I don't know, for 12 of us. That's a lot of IQs between us. So individually, we're quite bright, but collectively, if we bring that together, wow, we can be tremendous. One of the things that I hope we can start doing on these calls, when I turn the slides off in a minute, we'll have a conversation. This is a model very close to my heart. It used to be the 4 capabilities of leadership developed at MIT Sloan. When I was there, it was 4 capabilities. You can tell I'm quite old. It's now the 5 capabilities they've sort of developed it. But really, it's just think about a sort of a kite shape, visioning at the top, a key leadership skill, visionary leadership. What will the future look like? Or what do we need to be doing in the future? Why will we matter? And one of the questions I posed before this is, why will we be relevant? And this really fits into that. So top and bottom, visioning at the top, inventing at the bottom, or innovating, bringing things to life, putting actions into place. And then if we look horizontally, which I think is fascinating, and if you get a chance to look at this model or do any work at MIT Sloan, really, really interesting. On the left-hand side, we've got sense making. How are we going to gather information? So we've got this vision. Great. Now, how are we going to gather information from the outside world? How are we going to make sense of it? And of course, as leader, we can't possibly know everything. And this is one of the, I think, a really interesting leadership skill. Therefore, how are we going to gather information? One of which is going to our people, our staff, our colleagues, and delving into that collective brilliance. So how are we going to make sense of the world? What are we going to do about it? Are we going to invent, change, innovate? What are we going to put into practice? And on the right-hand side, relationships, you can make yourself a graph of this and kind of look at it, or score yourself 0 to 10. But how good are you at relating to others? How good is the business at relating to others? So I thought I'd just put this slide up as to have a look, because it's, they put visioning right at the top. Really, really, really important. If we look at our slide, my slide, this is my 5-step process to helping businesses, large or small, deliver change much more efficiently and effectively. And I just put it up, number 1, just to give us a sense. This is the exact model. Number 1, envision the future. So this is where we start. This is about what is the value of your business in the future? What will you be doing? Who will you be serving? Why will you matter? Why will you be relevant? And if you think about people like, say, Nokia or Apple, Apple are brilliant at this. Maybe Nokia not so much so, but so Apple are brilliant, constantly looking at the future, constantly reinventing themselves and their products. So what is your place in the future? There's a question. What is your place in the future? Why will you be relevant? What will you be doing for other people? How will you be serving them? Now, of course, if it's just a project you're thinking about, what's the vision for the project? What will the project be doing? How will the project be helping you? If it's digital transformation, if it's tech change, how will that help you? How will that help your business? How will it help your community, your customers, colleagues, clients, and so on? What will it be doing? How will it make things better? Yeah. How will you be interacting? So that piece about why will you be relevant in the future really fits into that step 1. And then for others, we're looking at the next step exact. So where are you now? If we know where we're going, step 1, step 2, where are you now? So what's the gaps? What gaps do we need to close? Are these gaps difficult? Are they easy? Are they small? Are they large? Just having those conversations to bring people together. And at that point, as leaders, we can start to draw out information from the business, from our colleagues, from people who we work with. And then the third step, look, what do we need to pay attention to? So you can see how it builds really to leverage the leadership, not just of leaders, but leadership in the business to help build an even better business and therefore be much more successful. Okay, just a couple of stats I thought just to share before we have a conversation is, why does this stuff matter? Well, look, 83% of companies say developing leaders is crucial. Okay, no, nothing new there, yes? 77% of businesses report that leadership is lacking. Again, probably nothing new, but what are we doing about it? And the answer probably is not enough when you look at the bottom number there. 5% of companies have implemented leadership development at all levels. Notice it's leadership of self, leadership of others, leadership of projects, tasks, and the business itself. And why this matters, if you look on the right-hand side, and I'm smiling because there's a number of stats around this, but we're still seeing these numbers around why does change fail? Number of change projects that fail, 70-80%, whether it's digital transformation, whether it's organizational change, M&A, was it 70-80% of M&A are said to fail to deliver on expectations? Why? If you think about, we've been sharing these stats, and I know they're questionable at times, but change is difficult, expensive, it's failure intensive, it's emotional. We know that because we've got a lot of data, to prove that. In fact, there's been, I think it might have been Side Business School, and maybe it might have been Ernst & Young actually did a project about 2 years ago. They came up with 78% of change still fails, and yet you've got people like Ernst & Young telling us that it fails and then telling us how to do it correctly, which does seem a bit nonsensical because they're not able to do so. I'm just teasing. What we need is to employ, as John mentioned earlier, the skills and knowledge and creativity that exists in people to better deliver change. A slightly out of date stat: poor middle managers in the UK cost businesses 2 billion a year. It's a good indicator. 25% of managers' time is wasted to unwarranted conflict and misunderstanding. That's an old stat from CIPD. It's actually reckoned that's more like 40% now. So if we get leadership right, we save time and money, guaranteed. And that's the bit that I think is really important, and why I want to bring this stuff to life. So I'm going to turn off share, and let's come back to the group, because I sort of talked for 15 minutes as I said I would. And I'd really like to open up conversation in the business then, in the group about this. What do we think? Mark, I don't know if Mark, if you want to come off mute, actually. You just made a comment really interesting about everyone goes into M&A with unrealistic expectations. I know you've got a ton of experience in this. I'd just love to hear a little bit about that and maybe your view on leadership of that.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm only speaking from my experience. Every
Yeah.
time we bought something, we had very high hopes for what it was we bought and how the individuals that were inside the businesses we bought would react. And the kind of 1+1 = 3 argument. And very rarely did it turn out to be quite as straightforward as that.
How many
Um,
businesses have you bought and sold over the years, Mark?
I've probably bought, I mean, nowhere near as many as say a corporate lawyer or a corporate M&A would do, because that's
Mm.
their bread and butter day in, day out. But
Yeah,
I've done it
yeah.
inside businesses in an organic sense. So I've probably done 20 to 25 buys and 2 or 3 disposals and 2 or 3 MBOs orchestrating.
Wow.
Uh, and
Thank you.
touching on your first point, it's very important to the 5 Frogs on a Log. I see that coming down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good book. I'm not one for reading books, but or not written for reading business books, but certainly I enjoyed 5 Frogs. That's one that I very much enjoyed. In terms of everybody who wants to do M&A should read that before they even consider doing M&A. In terms of the vision, I think it's very important that the individuals that are doing the buying are bought into the vision of the combined group, and so important to very, very quickly win the hearts and minds of the individuals sitting inside, whether it's the senior management or all the way through the business, to make sure that they're bought into what the collective vision looks like. And you're not just going to asset strip, although we have asset strip from time to time.
Thank you. And actually, hearts and minds is one in my dozen weeks I haven't actually put in. I was going to allude to it without actually doing a specific session on it, but maybe if anybody wants to, hey, we can always change that around and talk more about the hearts and minds stuff. That'd be great. Thanks. Oh, thanks so much for that. That's really interesting, Mark. Thank you. Andrew, I don't know, can we just, is Andrew around? Andrew Richards, are you able to mute and just come on? So Andrew, I just wanted to ask you, because in similarly to Mark, in many ways, you've bought and sold a dozen companies. You've turned around at least 2 or 3 or 2 that I can think of with subsidiaries. How important is vision in that acquisition and turnaround space for you?
I think it's really important early on, in both for the buy side as to why are you doing it, and too often people get diverted by the excitement of the buy rather than actually how it fits in and how it really is going to impact on your business. But for the business you're acquiring, they really need that reassurance that you're buying into either their values or they understand what your values are that they're going to come into. I think we probably come around to it, but I think the challenge is everyone gets excited by the buy. They don't then resource the integration and the communication and the change management afterwards. And particularly within sort of PE or groups, I've always struggled to get enough to resource that post acquisition 3 to 6 months.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Andrew. Anybody else just want to pop in on that? So tell us about vision, the importance of vision, how you've noticed it working, why it works, where it doesn't work. I'd be really interested. Alex, you've come off mute. Tell us a little bit about vision and digital transformation, perhaps.
Well, actually, I wasn't going to talk about that. Actually,
I was
sorry. I was going to go back to the M&A conversation, which is that I've never been part of the C-suite, managing through an M&A, but I have been, an employee in many companies that have been bought and sold. I've spent 25 years working in agencies, and anyone who knows agencies know that as soon as they get good, they get bought. And I spent 5 years in one agency that got bought 3 times, so I've always been on the sort of, sadly, on the tail end of M&As. And I think something which, just as a sort of almost as a bit of user experience feedback from my side, is that the people who are doing the boardroom decisions, they're so far away from actually having worked in the company. I mean, they haven't worked as an employee like the rest of the company for, sometimes 10 to 15 years. And so they don't actually get it. And so like when you know, again, I've worked in communications agencies, which you would think it's easy. We do internal communications. Someone buys the company, let's internally communicate it, but they haven't even invested in the, you know, resource within the company to do that. It's just crazy. And I just think it's a real statement of how far away they are really in the reality. And I think if I was going to, you know, say to anyone that was going to do something like that, I'd say go and work on the floor for a month. Go and actually, like you say, build those relationships with those middle managers and the
Right.
people less senior, and actually see, you know, get it from first hand, because yeah, they're just miles away from the reality. That's just all I would say.
Yeah.
Everyone's doing it.
Alex, thank you. I'm going to come to Richard in a minute. So I want to ask Richard a particular question. But Jasmine, you've got your hand up. Do you want to jump in, have a chat, please? Hello.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to what Alex was saying, which wholeheartedly agree with. And a lot of the work I do is with employee forums. And I think they are the answer to that problem. They're really great at sort of bridging that gap when they're run really well, of making sure that both sides listen to each other and understand each other, so that even though employees may not be able to change anything, if they understand it, you really bring them along with you. But exactly as you're saying, Alex, you need that intermediary of somebody like an employee rep who can tell you how to say it in the language that people will understand. And otherwise, values are just seen as, hypocritical, to be quite honest.
Well, exactly. They're just seen, let's face it, at that stage, when a company's been taken over 3 or 4 times, people aren't stupid. They know that that is because there's a value in that company, and that company therefore is going to make more revenue. So when someone comes at you with a flaky vision, you'll go, no, it's not. It's just because you want to make more money. Like, sorry, you know, I'm not buying into that. And I think that, I just think that people need to kind of realize that more at that top level. It's not just a vision isn't enough. You have to be seen to actually believe in it, and having got that vision even from the employees in the first place. Don't just tell them it. Say, what is it that you want from this company? You know, we're moving on. You know, what's in it for you? And I don't think that is done enough. Not only, like I said, from an experience of companies that have been bought and bought and bought.
Or even honestly, that there's nothing in it for them. Like, I think people prefer straight talking.
Absolutely. That's absolutely it. Yeah. So, you know, I think, yeah, there's a lot to be kind of learned. There's a really, M&As particularly, I think is, you know, it's tricky is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Richard, can I come to you, Richard? Because you made a comment earlier, and I know you've got experience on this. When it comes to vision, is it top down, bottom up? What's your thoughts on that, please?
Many of the people who reside in senior positions in the organization, in my experience, I won't call them leaders, because I believe that leaders exist at all levels. And so people who are in those kind of senior positions are notoriously bad at doing some of the things you have in your model, right, around, you know, sense making, you know, visioning, notoriously bad at it. And that's because they're bogged down with all sorts of pressures, right? So we say, right, CEO X, then, you know, give us an inspiring vision. Well, that CEO may not be able to give you an inspiring vision. They're also notoriously bad at sense making, right? I mean, people at senior levels know maybe 10% of what's going on within an organization, right? Sense making happens at lower levels in the organization. It then needs to flow up so that, you know, decision making can then occur. So, you know, this question of where does decision making happen, where does sense making happen, it actually happens at 2 different levels in the organization. So vision is actually something that in my experience, leaders, if we want to call them that, senior people are particularly bad at. And I think the more they can engage the people in their organization in crafting and creating a vision for the future, the better that vision will be. First of all, because it will align more with the values that individuals hold within the organization. It's impossible for an organization to impose values on people. So I'm going to tell you what you need to think is important. That may or may not align with what I think is important. It's impossible to change that without me being engaged in that process. And so the more that leaders, if we want to call them that, can really engage their people in crafting visions for crafting the vision for the organization, then I think that's really important. The slight kind of corollary to that is context dependent. And we heard before about M&A. In an M&A setting, then having that vision for what the merged or acquired new co is going to look like does really reside with senior people. I absolutely get that. But in a normal transformation sense, then I think it's a collaborative process.
Yeah. And I think I did I won't name names. I worked with a company last year for a big chunk of last year. It was about 300 million, maybe nearly 400 million pounds sort of tech. We'll call it a tech change, but it was more to it than that. But just my Alex, when you were talking about values, they had a couple of values. One was something like proactive, that standard one. But actually, when we went out to the business and asked them certain questions, what we found was they were anything but proactive. They were highly reactive. And in fact, one of the points that came out was management is highly reactive, and it's really hard for us as staff. So you've got 1,150 people working in the business, 1,100 plus were just sat there. They'd almost been coached to be reactive, coached to be told what to do. I'll tell you what to do, you react. So 1,100 people, skills, knowledge, creativity, many years experience, not dormant, but not, a lot of potential there to be accessed. And so we had to pay attention to that first. When management, I'm now calling the management at the top, there was very little leadership across the business. There were people with name tags that said leader, but not much leadership. Which actually, let's go to the business. Let's go and ask people what they would do, how they would do it, what they see the problems are, what they see the hurdles are, and then how they would overcome them. And the wealth of knowledge in the business, this notion of, if you like, when you can really trust and be collaborative, is amazing. But again, people say, well, there's no value here in us being collaborative. We're not respected, we're not trusted, we don't feel safe, we're not going to collaborate. So going back to Alex's point, and just that notion of how do you create an environment where people feel safe. Hence, leaders have two roles: one is lead the business, one is lead people. But create that space where people feel able to collaborate, and then you can access all that potential. Richard, I don't know what you think.
BJ, what you've just said is leadership is about creating the conditions under which all of that can thrive, and I think that's a fantastic definition of leadership right there. I can't do it as a leader. I can't do it all. I need to create the conditions under which that can be successful, and my people feel safe to do that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. So we just got a couple of minutes left. Anybody else? We've not heard from everybody. John, do you want to pop in? Got a couple of minutes left. John, do you want to pop in? Daniel, John, over to you.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Everybody's comments about value statements and things like that. I don't think we're talking about the preferred style of working. I think the value statement relates to the value that the company wants to ensure every client understands. So I'll put one on the side here. One of the ones that I put for one of the companies I ran was we must be prepared to tell the company that we've got a problem that exists before they tell us. That to me is a kind of value statement, not how you're going to approach it. But what used to happen was the managing director of the same company would turn around and say, right, when so-and-so made a mistake and we had a customer complaint come in, he would actually go and test what the person who handled that complaint did and how he handled it, and whether it fell in line with the value statement, which was we should have told the customer first. We knew it existed. That's our job, not theirs. The other thing is that, PJ, you know me for old. My background is people, and my background is making people communicate better. And it's about understanding job profiling, and it's about understanding putting the right person in the right job. So that with leadership, you build teams and design teams to work, and you build an infrastructure where within the teams, the manager of that team allows the team to run itself. So he doesn't have to manage, what he has to do is guide. And that's what I'm currently investing in a new application that I've built myself recently, which is going to actually enable that to happen. So the teams can understand where they are, what needs doing, and they can build a plan which they develop for themselves. And all they've got to do is report in to conditions about where they are and are they on target, on time, on budget.
Brilliant. Actually, that interesting point earlier on, but I was just last week one of the points was about accidental leaders or accidental managers. They're in a position of, and so they don't have some of the skills or understanding that you're talking about, I think, John. So that'd be interesting. If anybody wants to get in touch with John, you can always share details if you want to ask, or you can find John on LinkedIn, of course. Daniel, I don't know, Emma, a couple of people who haven't come in, if you want to come in before we close. I did promise 40 minutes. I've got 2 minutes left.
Can I come in quickly?
Please. Rick, don't tell us about the sun. Do not tell us about warm weather in South Africa, or I'll kick you off.
Okay. No, not at all. I won't do that. Just to give you a little bit of context, I'm following up from what Richard was saying earlier. I actually worked in the education sector in New Zealand and Australia for two of the oldest independent schools and the oldest school in New Zealand. And a university in Melbourne. And what we actually did there, coming back to getting the collective wisdom of all the stakeholders, was actually to engage a lot of the alumni who were captains of industry in the country. And we actually had these town hall, for want of a better description, town hall meetings where we engaged their wisdom to supplement that of the board. I haven't seen that. I'm going to have a look, Richard. So it was really to engage the collective wisdom of the capitals of industry in New Zealand to help advise our board about the vision and values of the organization. And these were, the leaders of the country. I needn't spell this out, but these were the guys who were going to employ a lot of the alum or the students and the alumni from this particular institution. I'm not going to drop any names here, but it was incredible, their passion and their input and their vision for what the relevance of this institution needed to be in future. For not only for the school, but for the country, because they had a track record of developing leaders throughout New Zealand. And I had the privilege of helping to facilitate that. So I must say that was an incredibly worthwhile exercise, which I thoroughly enjoyed. So that's my little contribution.
Brilliant. Thanks. Okay, anything else before we close? Otherwise, we'll say thank you. So next week, I'm not going to be here next week. I've got to go to work. So what we might, next week is about strategy. But what I might do is get a chum of mine, get a celebrity stand-in who's better looking and far smarter than me. And my plan actually was over the weeks, if I'm not around or if somebody else wants to step in and run a session, I'm really relaxed about that, okay? Because this isn't just about me. I want it to be more about the collective. But I have asked my colleague Lydia Parish, who is, say, far smarter than me. She got a first out of Oxford in something that unpronounceable. She is absolutely brilliant. So maybe we'll get Lydia to talk about strategy. So we'll go ahead. They'll just, if it's okay with you, there'll just be somebody different in there, just prompting. It'll be some of my theory, if you like, but some of hers too, so that you can continue the conversation. And heaven forbid you may prefer her, in which case I will. What is it, Alan Sugar, that awful TV program? I might get fired. But listen, that's probably what we're going to do, if that's okay. Before we close, any final points? Anything anybody wants to add? Mark sharing podcasts, that's great. Somebody's trying to charge somebody $39 for something. I think that's brilliant.
PJ,
yeah.
just a quickie, because I've got this new app being developed online. One of the things I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get it into schools, and I need a school to go into to test and deliver it. If anybody knows a way to get into that, because I'm struggling with most of the professors who say we know what we're doing.
And John, is that for the students or the teachers?
Students.
Okay, so you want to get, so the question to the group is if you can help anybody, have a quick, so somebody got to go, I know, because we promised 40 minutes. If you can just connect on here, if you want to just send anybody a message or send anybody, if you want to share your own emails, that's great. Or if you don't have time and you want to send me an email, because you all know my email address, and ask me to forward it on to somebody, I will, with your permission and blessing. Otherwise, I don't directly share emails, but I'll leave you for a minute to do it. It's great. Thanks so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. And a pleasure to have such esteemed company here with the experience that you have. So thanks so much. I'm going to say goodbye, but just give you just a second or two to do that. I wish you very well. Rick, thank you. Jasmine, thank you. Daniel, Vivian, John, Mark, Andrew, some of you are going now. Thank you. Alex, utterly brilliant. See you all in a week.
Are you copying us the notes, PJ?
My notes, John. Have you not written notes yourself?
Of course not. Don't be stupid.
God, I'm not your PA.
Well, you've got the comments.
So yeah, we'll do. I'm sure, Vivian, if you could help me, if we can cut and paste notes, and if you want the slides, all is fair, and I'm more than happy to share that.
It's the comments, really.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, John. Not my slides, just your comments. Get it?
No, don't want the slides.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye.